Who was Seth, exactly? And how is it that most people remain unaware of his astonishing story? While countless individuals know the tale of Cain and Abel, the third son born to Adam and Eve continues to be among the Bible's most underappreciated figures. And yet, his bloodline would forever alter the trajectory of human history. Seth represented far more than simply another biblical personality. He became the forefather of Noah, and consequently, of every single person living today. His account shows us how God's redemptive plan took root during the darkest hour of the original family, when one brother took the life of another, and all hope appeared to vanish. But before we proceed, if this is your first time here on this channel, think about tapping that like button and hitting subscribe. It really makes a difference. Also, share with us your location and the current time where you are. We genuinely want to hear from you. So, with no more delay, let's get started, shall we? The chosen son. The world exists in ruins. Eden remains sealed beyond flaming swords. Two brothers previously walked across these territories. One offered grain, the other offered blood. At present, Cain roams, bearing his mark and living in exile. Abel's voice continues, crying out from the soil. Eve mourns with empty arms, yet life begins to stir once more. Within her womb develops another opportunity, another ray of hope. When the infant comes, she gives him the name Seth. The term signifies appointed, selected, positioned in place. God has appointed me another offspring in place of Abel, she murmurs, because Cain killed him. This act of naming holds significance beyond a mother's sorrow. Seth arrives not as a substitute but as a fulfillment. Where Abel's existence was terminated prematurely, Seth's will extend the holy lineage. Where Cain chose the path toward violence, Seth will pursue righteousness. The appointment originates from above. Divine intention courses through this newborn's veins. Adam cradles his third son and perceives something unique. This child carries no mark of banishment like Cain, no hint of premature death like Abel. Rather, Seth embodies the image of his father, identical characteristics, identical divine essence transmitted from creation's initial breath. According to what Genesis tells us, when Adam reached 130 years of age, he fathered a son bearing his own likeness, conforming to his image, and named him Seth. The chronology holds importance. 30 years have elapsed since Abel's blood saturated the ground. 30 years spent grieving, waiting, questioning whether God's covenant with humanity would endure. Seth's arrival shatters this quiet. Hope returns to a household that had experienced only tragedy. Nevertheless, Seth enters a reality forever transformed. The purity of Eden cannot be reclaimed. Awareness of both good and evil influences every decision. Death has become part of human reality. The earth itself pushes back against human labor. Thorns strangle the grain. Perspiration must irrigate every harvest. This constitutes the legacy Seth inherits. But alongside difficulty comes intention. Seth will become father to a new branch. Through him, humanity will discover how to invoke the name of the Lord. Through his offspring will emerge the righteous, the devoted, those who walk alongside God in spite of the fractured world surrounding them, the lineage that will safeguard divine memory throughout the generations. In ancient writings, Seth symbolizes more than mere survival. He represents restoration. Where the opening chapters of human chronicles speak of descent, Seth inaugurates the extended story of ascent, not returning to Eden. That route stays blocked, but moving forward toward something unprecedented, a different form of connection with the divine, one constructed not upon innocence, but upon decision, not upon flawlessness, but upon dedication. The child develops strength. His parents invest in him everything they recall from the garden. The appearance of light before shadows appeared, the tone of God's voice during the evening's coolness, the designations of every living creature, the intention behind each star. This understanding becomes Seth's inheritance, more valuable than gold, more essential than breath itself. Seth discovers how to cultivate the ground in spite of its curse, to extract life from resistant soil, to recognize beauty in a reality marked by thorns. His hands develop calluses like his father's, His back curves beneath the sun's brutal beams, yet his heart stays receptive toward the divine. This becomes his characteristic trait, physical power balanced by spiritual awareness. The genealogical records identify Seth as the father of humanity's righteous branch. But initially, he is merely a son discovering how to exist in a fallen reality. Each day presents fresh obstacles: how to endure winter's severity, how to remedy illness without Eden's tree of life, how to transmit truth when writing does not yet exist. These everyday challenges mold Seth's character as significantly as any divine mission. Accounts develop around Seth's early years: how he discovered the distinction between toxic plants and medicinal ones, how he uncovered fire's mysteries, how he constructed the initial tools beyond what Adam showed him. Each advancement assists his family's survival. Each finding pushes against the curse's influence. Seth becomes humanity's initial innovator, the individual who identifies new routes forward when traditional paths are obstructed. As Seth reaches maturity, his purpose becomes clear. He will serve as the connection between Eden's recollection and humanity's tomorrow, the guardian of divine covenant in a reality that appears to have abandoned its maker. Through him, the sacred branch will persist. Through his children, worship will be reborn. Through his legacy, hope will outlast despair. Two bloodlines, two civilizations, two sons of Adam select divergent routes. Their offspring pursue these routes into the future. Cain's branch constructs cities. Seth's branch pursues God. From this division emerges humanity's initial great separation. Two methods of being human, two perspectives of what existence should develop into. Cain's descendants migrate eastward. They establish themselves in the territory of Nod, wandering, perpetually wandering, yet they do not wander without direction. They construct, they generate, they pioneer. Cain himself establishes a city, gives it his son's name, Enoch, the initial urban center in human chronicles. Walls emerge from the wilderness. Streets develop configurations. Humans assemble and structure communities for security and advancement. These cities become hubs of human accomplishment. Jabal creates livestock herding. Jubal develops musical instruments. Tubal-Cain produces implements from bronze and iron. Each generation contributes something fresh to human understanding. Art thrives together with technology. Melodies resonate through city plazas. Metal strikes against metal in workshops. The descendants of Cain expand the limitations of what humans can achieve. But something additional develops in these cities. Violence increases. Lamech, Cain's great-great-great-grandson, proclaims his lethal actions. "I have killed a man for my wound, and a young man for my injury," he announces. If Cain receives sevenfold vengeance, Lamech demands 77-fold. The tradition of revenge escalates. Blood demands additional blood. The pattern of violence that commenced with Abel's death proliferates like disease through human civilization. Arrogance follows this violence. The city constructors believe their achievements render them godlike. They establish their own regulations, develop their own spiritual customs, venerate their own representations. The recollection of Eden diminishes in their records. They compose new accounts about human beginnings, accounts that position humans as the champions, accounts that diminish the divine to remote legend. Meanwhile, Seth's branch follows a separate route. They stay connected to the land, near to the soil that Abel's blood previously watered. They remember. They safeguard the ancient accounts. They instruct their children about the garden, about the tree of life, about the covenant, that eventually things would be restored again. Seth's descendants do not reject innovation completely. They master agriculture. They create simple implements. They uncover new approaches to work with wood and stone. But their advancement serves distinct intentions, not control, but stewardship, not self-glorification, but divine service. They perceive themselves as guardians of creation instead of dominators of it. The difference intensifies with each generation. Cain's branch reproduces quickly. Their cities expand throughout the ancient territories. Commerce networks link distant communities. Specialized trades arise. Prosperity gathers. Political frameworks emerge. The initial kingdoms form in the eastern areas where Cain's children constructed their walls. Seth's branch expands more gradually. They prioritize depth instead of scope, excellence instead of volume. Each child obtains thorough training in divine recollection. Each generation transmits the sacred accounts unchanged. They become humanity's archivists, the preservers of truth in an era of forgetting. Their communities stay modest. Their way of life remains uncomplicated, but their bond to the divine stays powerful. Marriage traditions expose the separation. Cain's descendants intermarry without restriction. Physical attraction and social benefit direct their selections. Beauty and prosperity matter more than character or devotion. Their marriages generate intelligent children, skilled children, children who shine in arts and crafts and combat, but not necessarily children who recall God. Seth's branch selects marriage companions more deliberately. They pursue partners who embrace their principles, who recall the identical accounts, who worship the identical God. Their marriages may appear less theatrical, less intense, but they generate children who advance the sacred customs, who preserve the connection to divine intention. The two bloodlines establish distinct forms of civilization. Cain's descendants construct for themselves, for their own recognition. Their accomplishments reach toward heaven in resistance of divine power. They desire to be remembered, to create monuments that will exceed their limited lives. Their cities become evidence of human capacity released from divine limitation. Seth's descendants construct for others, for their children, for coming generations they will never encounter. Their accomplishments indicate beyond themselves toward divine intentions. They desire to be devoted, to create legacies that respect their Creator instead of themselves. Their modest communities become evidence of human capability, synchronized with divine purpose. Both bloodlines encounter the identical obstacles: disease, natural catastrophes, resource limitation, death's unavoidability, but they react distinctly. Cain's branch confronts these obstacles through human resourcefulness alone. They create medicine, construct flood barriers, establish storage arrangements, assemble armies. They attempt to resolve every problem through human exertion and intelligence. Seth's branch merges human exertion with divine reliance. They labor diligently, but also petition diligently. They organize thoughtfully, but also trust profoundly. They perceive obstacles as chances to exhibit faith instead of merely examinations of human capability. Their resolutions may be more straightforward, but they frequently demonstrate more sustainable across time. The separation generates friction between the bloodlines. Cain's descendants regard Seth's branch as outdated, undeveloped, superstitious. Why venerate an invisible God when human achievement generates visible outcomes? Why rely on divine assistance when human resourcefulness resolves problems? Why preserve old customs when new concepts present better resolutions? Seth's descendants regard Cain's branch as hazardous, arrogant, forgetful of their authentic beginnings. They observe the violence in the cities, the expanding haughtiness, the rejection of divine worship. They concern themselves that humanity is selecting the incorrect route, distancing from its intention, abandoning its creator in pursuit of created things. This friction will expand throughout the generations. Two perspectives of human fate competing for the future. Two approaches to comprehending humanity's position in creation. Two reactions to the essential questions that every generation must address. What does it signify to be human? What should humans strive to become? How should they connect to the divine? The responses that Cain's branch and Seth's branch create will influence everything that comes next. The world of the earliest people, the ancient territories, extend far beyond what contemporary minds can comprehend. Rivers course differently here. Mountains ascend higher. Valleys descend deeper. This is Earth before the great deluge reshaped its surface. A reality where geography itself appears more animated, more linked to the divine intentions that molded it from the start. The climate operates warmer than what arrives later. No ice blankets the northern areas. Abundant vegetation distributes across enormous territories. The atmosphere contains more moisture, generates ideal cultivation conditions throughout regions that will eventually become wilderness. Rivers course year-round through valleys that will subsequently know only periodic streams. the entire planet pulses with plenty. In this reality, humans exist differently than their remote descendants. Their bodies possess less deterioration from gathered generations of genetic decline. They stand higher, exist longer, recover quicker. Disease affects them more gently. The original blessing of creation still courses through their vessels, though reduced from Eden's flawlessness. Death exists, but arrives slowly, very slowly. Seth develops hearing accounts of paradise lost. His parents portray trees that produced fruit without thorns, rivers that irrigated the ground without precipitation, animals that existed in balance without fear, light that occupied the sky without sun or moon. These recollections mold Seth's comprehension of what the reality should become again eventually. But the reality Seth occupies bears minimal similarity to Eden's flawlessness. The ground opposes human cultivation. Weeds challenge crops. Insects devastate harvests. Wild animals become hazardous. Weather configurations become erratic. The curse impacts every dimension of daily existence. Yet, compared to subsequent eras, this reality still contains reflections of its original pattern. Forests blanket most of the territory. Enormous trees reach toward the sky. Their trunks expand so broad that complete families can find shelter inside hollow chambers. Their branches extend so distant that traversing from one edge of a tree's shade to another requires half a day. These giants supply everything humans require: food from their fruits, medicine from their bark, shelter from their branches, implements from their wood. The animals exhibit extraordinary intelligence, more than contemporary species demonstrate. They react to human speech, pursue intricate commands, labor together with humans in approaches that appear almost unbelievable to subsequent generations. Horses sprint quicker, birds soar higher, fish develop larger. Every species manifests its nature more completely in this reality, nearer to creation's beginning. Seth discovers how to cooperate with these creatures instead of dominate them. He communicates to oxen as associates in cultivation, summons to birds as companions in locating water, requests trees for authorization before gathering their fruit. This connection between humans and nature mirrors something of Eden's original balance. Not flawless cooperation, but respectful collaboration between the various forms of existence. Water courses more plentifully than in subsequent eras. Springs surface from rocky ground where none will exist following the flood. Rivers operate broader and cleaner. Lakes stretch to remote horizons. The water itself appears more essential, more animated with characteristics that fortify human health. Consuming from these sources supplies nourishment beyond simple hydration, restoration beyond straightforward thirst satisfaction. The soil generates crops with remarkable nutritional concentration, grains that develop taller than humans, fruits that sustain families for days, vegetables that supply complete nourishment from modest portions. The earth reacts to human cultivation with generous plenty. Though labor stays necessary, the outcomes far surpass the exertion invested. A single harvest can maintain a community through extended seasons. At night, the stars illuminate brighter than subsequent generations will ever observe. The atmosphere contains less pollution, less particles. The light reaches Earth with crystalline precision. Constellations narrate accounts that link directly to human experience. The movements of celestial bodies designate seasons and direct navigation with flawless accuracy. The sky functions as both calendar and compass for those who discover how to interpret its communications. Seth develops beneath these radiant stars. He masters their configurations from his father, Adam. Each constellation possesses significance, accounts of divine intention inscribed throughout the heavens. The identical God who traversed in Eden's garden positioned these lights in location. They remind humanity that divine presence still supervises the reality, in spite of the separation generated by transgression. Sound travels distinctly in this reality. Human voices extend farther. Animals communicate throughout greater distances. The earth itself appears more resonant. Music contains power that subsequent generations can scarcely envision. Melodies literally restore sickness. Harmonies pacify wild beasts. Rhythms coordinate group labor with supernatural productivity. The link between sound and spirit stays powerful. Minerals exist in pure forms. Metals surface from the ground with less refinement required. Precious stones exhibit colors and clarity unequaled by subsequent findings. These materials fulfill practical intentions as well as ornamental ones. Certain metals contain restorative characteristics. Specific stones amplify human capabilities. The earth supplies precisely what humans require for their physical and spiritual development. The weather pursues more foreseeable configurations. Rain arrives when required for crops. Sunshine comes when necessary for harvest. Storms deliver necessary transformation without devastating destruction. The seasons course smoothly from one to another. Humans can organize their activities with assurance that natural conditions will participate. The connection between heaven and earth sustains divine sequence. In this plentiful reality, Seth masters the art of recollection. Without written language, everything significant must be safeguarded in human minds. Accounts, melodies, genealogies, technical understanding, spiritual truths. Each generation becomes a living archive for the subsequent. Seth perfects techniques for structuring enormous amounts of information in easily recalled configurations. The landscape itself functions as a teaching instrument. Certain mountains contain importance for divine encounters. Specific valleys designate important events. Particular rivers establish tribal boundaries. The earth becomes humanity's initial book. Its characteristics narrate accounts that must be recalled. Its beauty mirrors truths about the divine character that molded it. Yet shadows expand throughout this plentiful reality. Violence distributes through Cain's cities. Arrogance corrupts human hearts. Recollection of Eden diminishes among those who select to forget. The very plenty that should stimulate gratitude instead nourishes human haughtiness. Some commence to believe their prosperity originates from their own wisdom instead of divine blessing. Seth observes these transformations with expanding concern. He perceives how rapidly humans can shift from worship to self-worship, from gratitude to entitlement, from cooperation to competition. The reality supplies everything required for human flourishing. But humans must select whether to utilize these gifts wisely or squander them on selfish pursuits. This selection will establish everything that comes next. The plentiful reality of the earliest people presents unlimited potential for good or evil. The identical resources that could construct paradise on earth can also generate hell on earth. Everything relies upon whether humans recall their Creator or abandon Him in their fascination with His creation. The rise of worship. Something transforms when Enoch is born to Seth. The child comes as hope assumes new form in the reality. Seth cradles his son and utters a name that signifies mortal, fragile. The term possesses weight beyond its straightforward significance. It recognizes human limitation while accepting human potential. Enoch will be mortal, but his mortality will fulfill divine intentions. The birth designates a transformation in human chronicles. According to the ancient records, during Enoch's lifetime, humans commenced to invoke the name of the Lord. This straightforward phrase portrays a revolution in human awareness. For the initial time since Eden's closure, humans actively pursue divine connection. They progressed beyond simple recollection of God toward actual relationship with Him. Before Enoch, worship existed but stayed private. Adam and Eve recalled their strolls with God in Eden's garden. They instructed their children about divine character and intention. They presented sacrifices as Abel had accomplished. But these acts of worship remained within family circles, personal manifestations of faith instead of communal celebrations. Enoch's generation transforms this configuration. They assemble together to invoke the divine name. They establish the initial intentional communities centered on worship. These assemblies might appear straightforward by subsequent standards. Groups of families gathering beneath starlight. Voices unified in melodies their grandparents taught them. Hands elevated toward heaven in gestures of surrender and appeal. But straightforwardness does not signify insignificance. These early worship assemblies create configurations that will resonate through all following human chronicles. The recognition that humans require divine assistance. The comprehension that God reacts to sincere pursuit. The power of corporate prayer and praise. The significance of instructing children to participate in sacred community. The Hebrew phrase, translated as "invoke the name of the Lord," possesses deeper significance than casual English implies. To invoke the name signifies to summon the character and authority of the one he named. When Enoch's generation initiates this custom, they recognize God's sovereignty over their existences. They submit to divine authority. They petition divine intervention in their circumstances. This invocation requires understanding of the divine name itself. Adam has safeguarded this sacred information through the generations since Eden, the name that God disclosed to him in the garden, the name that possesses power to restore and assist and transform. Enoch's generation obtains this name as precious inheritance. They utilize it with reverence and hope. The assemblies probably commence modest, Seth instructing his son Enoch the sacred customs, Enoch sharing these truths with his own children, extended families gathering to recall divine goodness together. But the custom distributes as its benefits become evident. Communities that invoke the Lord experience divine blessing, protection from catastrophes, direction in difficult decisions, restoration for the sick, peace in conflicts. Word travels through the ancient territories. Other families hear about these assemblies. They arrive pursuing to discover the divine name for themselves, to experience the peace and power that follows true worship. The assemblies expand from family gatherings to tribal celebrations, from occasional assemblies to regular festivals, from private devotion to public declaration. Music develops as central to these worship experiences. The descendants of Seth discovered how to establish instruments from natural materials, flutes from hollow reeds, drums from stretched animal hides, string instruments from dried gourds and sinew. These implements assist human voices to transmit divine praise throughout valleys and hills. They establish atmosphere that welcomes divine presence into human assemblies. The melodies themselves safeguard crucial information. Genealogies arranged to memorable tunes, accounts of divine faithfulness structured in poetic verses, covenants about future hope integrated into choruses that children can easily master. Music becomes the technology that safeguards truth throughout generations in a reality without written language. Dance follows the music, not entertainment, but manifestation of divine joy. Bodies shifting in configurations that mirror the balance of creation itself. Movements that narrate accounts about divine character and human intention. Physical manifestation of spiritual truths that words alone cannot hold. The complete person engaged in worship of the complete God. Sacred locations commence to surface. Not structures, but locations where divine encounters transpire more regularly. Hilltops where the stars appear nearer, valleys where voices extend farther, groves where ancient trees supply natural cathedrals. These locations become pilgrimage destinations, sites where different families and tribes assemble for major celebrations. Certain individuals surface as leaders in these worship communities, people who exhibit special gifting for leading melodies, for structuring assemblies, for instructing children, for presenting prayers that appear particularly effective. These leaders do not demand divine authority for themselves. They merely fulfill the community's requirement for coordination and direction in worship customs. The chronology of worship assemblies pursues natural rhythms, new moon celebrations, seasonal festivals synchronized with planting and harvest, Sabbath observances that supply rest from labor. These regular configurations establish stability in community existence. They guarantee that divine relationship obtains priority together with daily survival requirements. Sacrificial presentations follow the vocal worship, animals presented in gratitude for divine provision, grains presented as symbols of human reliance on divine blessing, precious items surrendered to exhibit that God deserves the finest of human possessions. These sacrifices instruct important lessons about divine worthiness and human stewardship. The children obtain special attention in these worship assemblies. They master the sacred melodies, participate in straightforward rituals, hear the ancient accounts narrated in approaches that capture their imagination. The community comprehends that worship customs must transfer successfully to the subsequent generation, or they will vanish completely. Every assembly incorporates elements designed specifically for young participants. As the custom distributes, It establishes distinction between communities that invoke the Lord and those that do not. Seth's descendants become recognized as the worshiping people. Their communities can be identified by the sounds of praise that extend throughout the landscape. Their daily rhythms incorporate regular pauses for prayer and gratitude. This distinction will expand more pronounced as time elapses. The worship of the true God will become the defining characteristic of the righteous branch, the custom that separates them from surrounding cultures that shift toward false gods and human arrogance. What commences in Enoch's lifetime as straightforward invocation of the divine name will create into rich customs of faith that maintain humanity through its darkest seasons ahead. The silent generations. The genealogies document their names but narrate minimal accounts. Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared. These descendants of Seth exist extended lives and leave minimal written chronicles. Yet their names themselves possess significance, hidden clues about their character and intention. Windows into the ancient reality's comprehension of human fate. Kenan obtains his name from his father Enoch. The term signifies possession or acquired, not in the sense of possessing objects, but in the deeper sense of being established. Kenan symbolizes the generation that consolidates the worship customs initiated in his father's era. He transforms the spontaneous spiritual movements of Enoch's era and establishes sustainable customs from them. Under Kenan's guidance, the invocation of the Lord's name becomes systematic. Regular assemblies substitute sporadic gatherings. Established melodies substitute improvised praise. Trained leaders substitute spontaneous speakers. This systematization might appear to diminish spiritual vitality, but actually it guarantees spiritual survival. The customs become powerful enough to endure difficult seasons ahead. Kenan exists 910 years according to the ancient records, nearly a complete millennium of devoted service. During this immense lifespan, he observes the rise and decline of complete civilizations among Cain's descendants, cities constructed and devastated, technologies created and rejected, political arrangements established and dissolved. Yet through all these transformations, Kenan sustains steady devotion to divine worship. His son Mahalalel possesses a name signifying praise of God or glory of God. This name implies that worship customs persist to create during his lifetime. The straightforward invocation of divine name transforms into more elaborate manifestations of praise. Melodies become more sophisticated. Instruments increase in variety. Sacred dances expand more intricate. The community discovers how to present worship deserving of the divine glory it celebrates. Mahalalel exists 895 years. His extended lifespan encompasses the creation of advanced technologies among Cain's descendants. He observes the invention of bronze working, perceives the rise of urban architecture, witnesses the establishment of intricate irrigation arrangements, yet he selects to preserve the more straightforward lifestyle of his ancestors. Technology fulfills human requirements, but does not substitute divine reliance. During Mahalalel's lifetime, the difference between the two bloodlines becomes more distinct. Cain's descendants accomplish extraordinary innovations in metallurgy, agriculture, and construction. Their cities expand into regional powers. Their armies create sophisticated weapons. Their artists establish works of stunning beauty. Their accomplishments appear to exhibit human potential unleashed from divine limitations. Meanwhile, Seth's branch appears to stagnate in comparison. They preserve traditional agricultural customs, construct straightforward structures, establish functional instead of ornamental objects, safeguard ancient melodies instead of compose new ones. To external observers, they appear outdated, resistant to advancement, trapped in obsolete approaches of thinking. But this apparent stagnation fulfills significant intentions. While Cain's descendants pursue innovation for its own benefit, Seth's branch concentrates on preservation of essential truths. They become humanity's memory guardians, the protectors of divine disclosure transmitted from Eden itself. Their resistance to transformation protects them from the spiritual corruption that follows rapid cultural transformation. Jared persists this configuration when he assumes guidance of the righteous branch. His name signifies descent, or to arrive down. This might refer to physical descent from Adam through the generations. But it also implies spiritual descent, the persisting course of divine blessing from generation to generation, the preservation of sacred customs in spite of external pressures to reject them. Jared exists 962 years, the longest documented lifespan except for Methuselah, who arrives later. This remarkable longevity permits him to supply stability throughout nearly 10 centuries of human creation. He functions as living connection between the earliest post-Eden generations and the pre-flood reality's final chapters. His recollection encompasses the complete chronicles of antediluvian civilization. Under Jared's direction, Seth's descendants encounter escalating pressure to conform to surrounding cultures. Intermarriage with Cain's branch becomes more widespread. Young people question the value of preserving ancient customs. The appeal of city existence and technological advancement establishes friction within traditionally devoted families. Some reject their heritage completely, yet Jared maintains the community together through personal example and patient instruction. He exhibits that devotion to divine summons delivers deeper satisfaction than material prosperity. That relationship with God supplies more security than human achievement. That the ancient approaches safeguard wisdom that innovation cannot substitute. These silent generations fulfill crucial functions in divine chronicles. They supply continuity between the dramatic spiritual breakthrough of Enoch's lifetime and the remarkable spirituality of Enoch, who arrives later. They preserve the sacred customs during the extended centuries when nothing spectacular transpires. They demonstrate that devotion does not demand constant miraculous intervention. Their existences instruct significant lessons about spiritual maturity. Young faith frequently requires dramatic experiences to maintain enthusiasm. Mature faith discovers God in ordinary daily experience. These patriarchs worship consistently whether or not they obtain special disclosures. They petition regularly whether or not they observe miraculous responses. They stay devoted whether or not their circumstances appear to reward their devotion. The extent of their existences supplies opportunity for profound spiritual creation. Contemporary humans might accomplish significant things in 70 years, but these ancient humans possessed centuries to expand in wisdom and comprehension, to witness configurations throughout multiple generations, to create spiritual customs refined by hundreds of years of experience. Their longevity becomes divine gift that enables spiritual achievements unattainable in shorter lifespans. Their names safeguarded in the sacred genealogies guarantee their contribution to divine chronicles obtains recognition. Though minimal accounts survive about their specific actions, their names testify to their character and intention. Future generations can perceive the unbroken chain of devotion that links Seth to Noah, the steady transmission of divine recollection throughout the centuries that separate Eden from the flood. Contemporary readers might discover these silent generations tedious compared to more dramatic biblical figures, but their modest devotion makes possible everything that comes next. Without their preservation of sacred customs, Enoch would possess no foundation for his prophetic ministry. Without their maintenance of divine recollection, Noah would not recognize God's voice when judgment finally arrives. They symbolize the majority of devoted believers throughout Chronicles. Most who fulfill God never execute miracles or obtain special disclosures. Most exist ordinary existences marked by steady obedience instead of spectacular achievement. Most contribute to divine intentions through devoted daily selections instead of dramatic public ministry. The silent generations respect these ordinary heroes of faith. Enoch walks with God. Among Seth's descendants, one stands distinct. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, exists differently than those surrounding him. The ancient record states merely that he walked with God. These four terms portray an existence that shatters every conventional configuration, an existence that contacts eternity while staying completely human. Enoch commences existence like any other child of Seth's branch. Born into the custom of invoking the Lord's name, raised on accounts of Eden and covenants of divine devotion, instructed the genealogies that link his family to Adam himself. Nothing in his early years implies the remarkable fate that awaits him. But something transforms when Enoch reaches adulthood. The arrival of his son Methuselah designates a transformation in his spiritual creation. The name Methuselah signifies when he dies, it shall arrive. This prophetic name implies Enoch obtains divine disclosure about approaching judgment. The arrival of his son awakens prophetic insight that will establish the remainder of his existence. From this moment forward, Enoch commences walking with God in approaches unprecedented since Adam's expulsion from Eden. This walking involves more than occasional petition or worship. It portrays continuous divine communion, constant spiritual awareness, existence experienced in flawless balance with divine purpose and intention. The phrase "walked with God" appears infrequently in ancient literature. Only two men obtained this portrayal before the flood, Enoch and Noah. The Hebrew term for walking implies movement toward a destination, advancement along a predetermined route. Enoch's existence becomes a journey deeper into divine relationship with each elapsing year. This walk demands remarkable spiritual discipline. Enoch must synchronize his thoughts with divine thoughts, his desires with divine desires, his actions with divine intentions. Every selection becomes opportunity for greater balance or greater discord with the divine purpose. Every moment presents potential for deeper communion or spiritual withdrawal. The walking also requires escalating separation from worldly concerns. While others concentrate on gathering wealth or constructing cities or creating technologies, Enoch invests his energy in spiritual pursuits. He examines divine character, contemplates divine intentions, pursues deeper comprehension of divine truth. His priorities diverge radically from those of his contemporaries. Enoch creates prophetic capabilities during his walk with God. He obtains visions of future events, comprehension of divine plans, disclosure about spiritual realities hidden from ordinary human perception. These insights make him valuable counselor to those pursuing divine direction. But they also establish distance between him and those who prefer comfortable ignorance. The ancient Book of Enoch, though not incorporated in the biblical canon, safeguards customs about his prophetic ministry. According to these sources, Enoch obtains detailed disclosures about angels and heavenly realms, about the corruption distributing through human civilization, about divine judgment organized for the wicked, about hope reserved for the righteous. These disclosures show Enoch the cosmic scope of divine intentions. He perceives beyond the immediate concerns of daily survival to eternal consequences of human selections. He comprehends how individual decisions impact spiritual realities in heavenly locations. He recognizes the spiritual warfare underlying visible human conflicts. Enoch's walk with God also generates practical wisdom for earthly existence. He discovers divine principles for agriculture and animal husbandry, obtains insight into natural phenomena that assists his community survive catastrophes, creates comprehension of human nature that makes him effective counselor and judge. His spirituality amplifies instead of reduces his practical capabilities. The relationship transforms Enoch's physical being as well as his spiritual nature. Extended communion with God impacts his body in approaches that prefigure resurrection reality. He commences to transcend normal human limitations. His aging process decelerates. His health improves. His strength escalates instead of decreases with advancing years. Other members of Seth's branch notice these transformations in Enoch. They pursue his counsel on spiritual matters, request him to interpret dreams and visions, petition his prayers for restoration and direction. Enoch becomes spiritual leader for the righteous community. His authority originates not from position or inheritance, but from obvious divine relationship. But Enoch's spiritual creation establishes friction with surrounding cultures. His prophetic communications challenge the expanding wickedness in Cain's cities. His lifestyle contradicts the materialistic values becoming dominant among humans. His warnings about divine judgment appear fanatical to those who believe human advancement makes divine intervention unnecessary. The opposition escalates as Enoch's prophetic ministry expands bolder. According to ancient customs, he preaches fearlessly about approaching judgment. He summons humans to repent from wickedness and return to divine worship. He warns that divine patience possesses limits and that consequences for transgression will eventually arrive. These communications make him enemies among the powerful and influential. Yet Enoch persists his walk with God in spite of external opposition. His relationship with the divine becomes more precious than human approval. His confidence in divine truth expands stronger than his concern for personal safety. His commitment to prophetic ministry exceeds his desire for comfortable existence. The walk culminates in unprecedented experience. After 365 years of escalating divine communion, Enoch's earthly existence concludes in unique fashion. The ancient record states that God took him. He does not experience death like other humans. Instead, he obtains translation directly from earthly existence to heavenly existence. This translation fulfills multiple intentions. It exhibits divine power over death itself. It supplies hope for others that death need not be the final human destination. It safeguards Enoch from the violent persecution that his prophetic ministry would eventually attract. It establishes him as heavenly witness to human events on earth. Enoch's disappearance establishes profound impact on those who stay. His translation demonstrates that his prophetic communications originated from divine source. His remarkable exit validates his declarations about spiritual realities beyond physical perception. His absence creates void that reminds the community of the divine relationship they too could pursue. The recollection of Enoch's walk with God becomes inspiration for future generations. His example shows that intimate divine relationship stays possible even in a fallen reality. His existence exhibits that humans need not accept spiritual mediocrity as their permanent condition. His translation covenants that divine intentions extend beyond earthly existence into eternal realities. The Gnostic Seth, secret Messiah. Centuries following the biblical accounts were documented. Seth surfaces in new literature with radically distinct character. Gnostic writers of the early Christian era transform him from modest patriarch into cosmic redeemer. They establish elaborate mythologies that position Seth as central figure in spiritual salvation. These writings disclose more about Gnostic theology than historical Seth, but they exhibit his enduring symbolic power. The Apocryphon of John presents Seth as divine emissary dispatched to counteract the work of false gods. In this Gnostic cosmology, the material reality results from the mistakes of ignorant divine beings designated archons. Humanity becomes trapped in physical bodies that obscure their authentic spiritual nature. Seth comes to awaken selected souls to their divine origins and direct them back to the spiritual realm. This Gnostic Seth carries minimal similarity to the biblical patriarch. Instead of being Adam's third son, he becomes a spiritual principle that existed before material creation. His mission involves disclosing secret understanding instead of safeguarding sacred customs. His followers pursue escape from the physical reality instead of devoted living within it. The name Seth becomes symbol for spiritual awakening instead of historical genealogy. The Gospel of the Egyptians creates these themes further. It portrays Seth as the great invisible spirit who generates divine light in opposition to material darkness. This writing presents three appearances of Seth throughout Chronicles. First, as the original divine light. Second, as the revealer of hidden understanding. Third, as the final redeemer who will complete the salvation process for spiritual pursuers. According to this Gnostic mythology, Seth's authentic followers are scattered throughout Chronicles, but stay linked through their possession of special understanding. They recognize their divine origins in spite of being trapped in material bodies. They pursue liberation through comprehension instead of faith. They consider themselves spiritually superior to ordinary humans who stay ignorant of their authentic nature. The Sethian Gnostics establish elaborate ritual arrangements around Seth's supposed instructions. They create baptismal ceremonies that declare to reproduce Seth's divine nature in human participants. They custom sacred meals that supposedly supply spiritual nourishment unavailable through ordinary food. They engage in meditation techniques designed to separate the soul from bodily concerns and reconnect it with divine light. These rituals mirror fundamental Gnostic beliefs about the nature of salvation. Physical actions cannot supply spiritual liberation in their perspective. Only secret understanding can liberate the soul from material imprisonment. Seth becomes the great instructor who initially disclosed this understanding and persists to transmit it to worthy recipients throughout the generations. The Gnostic writings also portray Seth's cosmic battle against the forces of ignorance and material bondage. He leads armies of light beings against the archons who established the physical reality. This warfare transpires in spiritual dimensions invisible to ordinary human perception. Victory will arrive when enough souls awaken to their divine nature and escape material existence completely. Sethian communities create around these instructions throughout the Mediterranean reality during the early centuries of the Christian era. They attract followers who feel alienated from mainstream religious customs, who pursue more esoteric spiritual experiences, who believe that salvation demands special understanding unavailable to the masses. Seth's name supplies ancient authority for their innovative theological concepts. These groups frequently blend Seth's mythology with other religious customs. They incorporate elements from Greek philosophy, Egyptian mystery religions, Jewish mysticism, and Christian theology. Seth becomes part of syncretic arrangements that attempt to unite all spiritual wisdom into comprehensive worldviews. His biblical origins supply Jewish and Christian credibility, while his Gnostic creation permits unlimited theological creativity. The historical link between biblical Seth and Gnostic Seth stays tenuous at finest. Gnostic writers utilize the name and basic genealogical information from Genesis, but establish completely new character and mythology around these borrowed elements. Their Seth fulfills Gnostic theological intentions instead of safeguarding ancient historical recollections. Yet, the Gnostic appropriation of Seth discloses something significant about his enduring spiritual appeal. Even heretical religious movements recognize Seth's symbolic power as the appointed substitute for Abel, as the founder of the righteous lineage, as the ancestor of those who invoke the divine name. They transform these qualities to fulfill their own intentions, but they cannot ignore Seth's fundamental significance in spiritual chronicles. The Gnostic Seth also exhibits how religious customs transform through reinterpretation throughout centuries and cultures. The straightforward biblical account of Seth's arrival and genealogy becomes foundation for intricate theological arrangements that would astonish the original authors. Religious symbols demonstrate remarkably adaptable to new contexts and requirements. Contemporary scholars examine Gnostic Seth primarily for what these writings disclose about early Christian diversity and the creation of alternative religious movements. The elaborate mythologies supply insight into Gnostic theology and custom. The ritual portrayals illuminate religious existence in communities that existed together with mainstream Christianity. The philosophical concepts show how ancient religious thinkers attempted to resolve fundamental questions about human existence and divine reality. But for those interested in the historical Seth, Gnostic literature supplies more confusion than clarity. These writings mirror 2nd and 3rd century theological speculation instead of 1st millennium historical recollection. They utilize Seth's name and basic biographical details as starting points for creative religious imagination, instead of attempts to safeguard authentic ancient customs. The difference between biblical Seth and Gnostic Seth discloses the distinction between historical narrative and theological symbolism. Biblical authors present Seth as authentic person who existed in specific historical context and executed concrete historical functions. Gnostic authors utilize Seth as theological symbol that symbolizes abstract spiritual principles and cosmic realities. Both approaches fulfill legitimate intentions within their respective religious communities. Biblical Seth supplies genealogical foundation for the righteous lineage that culminates in Noah and eventually in Christ. Gnostic Seth supplies theological framework for comprehending spiritual awakening and salvation through understanding. Neither custom should be judged completely by the standards of the other. The persistence of Seth's name throughout these diverse religious customs testifies to his fundamental significance in human spiritual imagination. Whether comprehended as historical patriarch or cosmic principle, Seth symbolizes hope for spiritual renewal in a fallen reality. He embodies the possibility that divine intentions can survive human failure and persist working toward ultimate restoration. Seth, in Jewish mysticism. Jewish custom expands far beyond biblical narrative in its treatment of Seth. Rabbinic literature transforms him from straightforward patriarch into cosmic figure whose influence molds all following chronicles. Mystical writings portray him as priest, scribe, and proto-messianic redeemer. These creations show how post-biblical Judaism comprehended Seth's significance for divine intentions. The Book of Jubilees supplies early foundation for Seth's expanded role. This ancient writing portrays Seth as the initial human to master writing from angels. According to Jubilees, divine messengers instruct Seth to document genealogies, safeguard sacred customs, and preserve astronomical understanding. His writing becomes humanity's initial attempt to safeguard divine disclosure in permanent form. This custom positions Seth as the inventor of human literacy. Before him, understanding transmitted through oral transmission alone. Recollection functioned as humanity's only archive. But Seth obtains divine inspiration to establish written symbols that can safeguard information throughout generations. His invention guarantees that sacred truths survive even when human recollection fails. Rabbinic sources portray Seth as the initial priest in human chronicles. They argue that his sacrifice to God established the configurations that subsequent priests would pursue. His presenting techniques become models for proper worship. His comprehension of divine requirements supplies foundation for ritual arrangements that create throughout Jewish chronicles. Some customs credit Seth with constructing the initial altar for sacrifice. Others portray him as the initial human to petition at regular times, instead of only in crisis situations. Still, others present him as the initial to instruct children formal religious instruction. These various customs agree that Seth initiated systematic religious customs that distinguish worship from simple superstition. Kabbalistic literature advances these themes significantly further. Mystical writings portray Seth as a divine soul incarnated in human form to rescue humanity from spiritual corruption. His arrival symbolizes intervention by higher spiritual forces to prevent human chronicles from concluding in complete failure. His existence supplies bridge between divine and human realms. According to these mystical customs, Seth possesses understanding of divine names that provide him power to execute miracles. He grasps the hidden significance within Hebrew letters, understanding their secret meanings. Spiritual forces bend to his will, allowing him to cure sickness and vanquish demonic powers. His understanding bridges two worlds, the practical wisdom needed for life on earth and the mysterious knowledge of heavenly realms. Kabbalistic writings, including the Zohar, portray Seth as the spiritual progenitor of every righteous soul across the ages. These teachings explain that certain exceptional souls are, in fact, literal reincarnations carrying Seth's divine essence within them. Such special individuals continue his sacred work, guarding divine truth and fighting against spiritual evil in every age. Through this mystical lineage, Seth becomes the spiritual forefather of prophets, wise teachers, and righteous rulers throughout Jewish history. Moses inherits a portion of Seth's divine essence. David carries forward the royal authority that Seth possessed. The Messiah will bring to completion the mission Seth initiated in humanity's earliest days. Certain Kabbalistic traditions describe Seth as still alive, hidden somewhere on this earth. Much like Enoch and Elijah, he never experienced true death but continues shaping human events from concealment. Those who pursue spiritual advancement might encounter him through visions or in their dreams. His presence offers continual guidance to seekers of divine wisdom. Other mystical teachings place Seth within the heavenly court, where he advocates for humanity before God's throne. Having lived through human struggle firsthand, he serves as an effective mediator for those confronting spiritual trials. The righteousness he accumulated provides protective merit that can shield less righteous people from divine punishment. Medieval Jewish writings frequently credit Seth as the author of numerous ancient wisdom books. They claim he wrote works covering astronomy, medicine, agriculture, and spiritual growth. These books supposedly contain divine revelations that Seth received directly from angels or through prophetic visions. Though the actual manuscripts have vanished, their wisdom continues influencing human progress. This tradition of Seth as cosmic scribe extends beyond mere authorship to encompass preserving all crucial knowledge. He becomes humanity's original librarian, the keeper of information vital for both human survival and spiritual advancement. Without his dedicated efforts, later generations would have completely lost their connection to divine origins. Some rabbinical sources identify Seth as the true heir to Adam's spiritual power. While Cain bore the curse and Abel died prematurely, Seth received the divine blessing originally bestowed upon humanity in Eden. This blessing encompasses dominion over creation, comprehension of divine intentions, and responsibility for humanity's spiritual guidance. This inherited authority establishes Seth as the first king in a spiritual sense, though not politically. His kingdom consists of those choosing righteousness over wickedness. His subjects serve voluntarily rather than through conquest. His reign operates through moral persuasion rather than physical coercion. Jewish mystical traditions also describe Seth's involvement in future messianic events. They teach that the Messiah will possess Seth's divine essence completely. The Messianic era will restore conditions that existed during Seth's lifetime, when humans could communicate directly with divine messengers and live harmoniously with creation. Some traditions describe specific indicators that will announce the Messiah's arrival, including the rediscovery of Seth's lost wisdom books. Other predictions claim Seth himself will return physically to prepare humanity for messianic redemption. These prophecies reflect the enduring Jewish conviction that Seth's mission remains unfinished until all creation experiences complete restoration. The persistence of these mystical traditions about Seth across centuries of Jewish development proves his central importance within Jewish spiritual consciousness. Even when historical facts remain uncertain, his symbolic significance continues inspiring theological reflection and spiritual aspiration. Modern Jewish scholars study these mystical traditions primarily for insights into post-biblical Jewish theology rather than historical information about the ancient Seth. The elaborate developments reveal how Jewish thinkers used biblical figures as frameworks for exploring fundamental questions about divine purpose, human nature, and cosmic destiny. Yet even as theological symbols, these traditions preserve important truths about Seth's significance. They acknowledge his role as founder of the righteous lineage. They recognize his importance in preserving divine revelation. They honor his contribution to humanity's spiritual development. Whether understood literally or symbolically, Seth remains central to Jewish understanding of divine purposes within human history. The Book of Adam and Eve. Ancient storytellers expanded the brief biblical accounts of humanity's first family into detailed narratives rich with emotion and vivid detail. The life of Adam and Eve, also called the Apocalypse of Moses, places Seth at the center of humanity's most profound encounters with death, hope, and divine mercy. These stories reveal how later generations understood Seth's role in the cosmic drama of fall and redemption. The narrative opens as Adam confronts his final illness. For 9 centuries, he has carried the burden of introducing sin and death into human experience. Now, mortality claims him just as it claimed his son Abel previously. But Adam doesn't face death alone. Seth stands beside his father's bedside, ready to serve in ways that will define his character forever. Eve recognizes that Adam's end approaches and searches for some way to ease his suffering. She remembers the tree of life from Eden's garden. If she could obtain oil from that sacred tree, perhaps it could heal Adam's illness, or at least ease his pain. This oil represents more than medicine. It symbolizes hope that divine mercy might still reverse death's curse. Seth volunteers for this seemingly impossible mission. He will travel to Eden's gates and request the oil of mercy from the angelic guardians. The task appears hopeless from a human perspective. Eden has remained sealed since his parents' banishment. Cherubim with flaming swords guard every entrance. No human has approached those gates since the day of exile. But Seth's willingness to attempt the journey reveals his character. He doesn't calculate success probabilities. He doesn't debate the theology of divine mercy. He simply responds to his father's need with whatever action remains possible. This readiness to serve, regardless of apparent futility, becomes a hallmark of Seth's approach to life. The journey to Eden takes Seth through landscapes still bearing traces of paradise lost. Rivers that once watered the garden now flow beyond their ancient channels. Trees that once bore perfect fruit now struggle against thorns and disease. Animals that once lived in harmony now flee from human presence. Every mile reminds Seth of what humanity forfeited through disobedience. When Seth finally reaches Eden's boundary, he encounters the cherubim standing guard with their flaming swords. These angelic beings recognize him immediately. They know his lineage. They understand his mission. But they also represent divine justice that cannot be compromised by human need or desire. The cherubim deliver God's message to Seth with a mixture of judgment and hope. The oil of life cannot be granted now. Adam must face death as a consequence of his choices. But this death is not final defeat. Someday, in the fullness of time, divine mercy will triumph over divine justice. The tree of life will again provide healing for humanity. The angels tell Seth about future events that will transform human destiny. They speak of one who will come to crush the serpent's head, of a resurrection that will conquer death itself, of new creation that will surpass even Eden's original glory. Seth receives these prophecies as precious treasure to carry back to his dying father. The message provides specific timing for these future hopes. After 5,500 years have passed, the promised deliverer will arrive. He will accomplish what the oil of life could have done temporarily. He will provide eternal healing for all who trust in divine mercy. Death will lose its sting, and the grave will lose its victory. Seth returns from Eden with empty hands but a full heart. He cannot bring the oil his father needs, but he carries promises that transcend any temporary healing. The news of future redemption provides comfort that mere medicine could never supply. Hope proves more powerful than healing when eternal perspective replaces temporal concern. Adam receives Seth's report with peaceful acceptance. The divine message confirms what he has long suspected. Death must be accepted as just consequence for sin, but death need not be feared as final ending. Divine purposes extend beyond current circumstances into future realities that will vindicate divine goodness and fulfill divine promises. The dying Adam uses his remaining strength to teach Seth and his other children about their responsibilities as carriers of divine hope. They must preserve the promises Seth received at Eden's gates. They must maintain faith in divine mercy despite present sufferings. They must prepare future generations for the redemption that will eventually come. When Adam finally dies, Seth takes charge of burial arrangements. He prepares his father's body with reverent care. He selects an appropriate burial site. He ensures that proper honors are paid to the man who first received divine image and will someday be restored to divine glory. The funeral becomes testimony to hope rather than surrender to despair. According to the ancient narrative, divine messengers appear at Adam's burial to demonstrate proper procedures for honoring the dead. They show Seth how to prepare bodies for burial in ways that acknowledge both human mortality and hope for resurrection. These techniques become standard practices for all subsequent generations. Seth also receives instructions about preserving Adam's body for future resurrection. Certain spices must be used. Specific burial positions must be maintained. The gravesite must be marked and protected. These requirements reflect belief that physical resurrection will require physical remains. Death interrupts human existence but does not destroy human identity. The story concludes with Seth assuming leadership of the human family. He becomes keeper of divine promises received at Eden's gates, guardian of hope for future redemption, teacher of faith that transcends present circumstances. His character, shaped by his mission to Eden, enables him to guide humanity through the long centuries of waiting for promised deliverance. This ancient narrative transforms Seth from simple biblical figure into complex character wrestling with ultimate questions about life, death, and divine purpose. His willingness to attempt impossible missions, his acceptance of disappointing answers, his commitment to preserving hope despite present suffering, these qualities make him suitable ancestor for all who must live by faith rather than sight. The oil of mercy that Seth could not obtain becomes symbol for the divine grace that will eventually be provided through different means. His unsuccessful journey to Eden foreshadows the successful journey that the promised deliverer will someday make. His empty hands point forward to hands that will be filled with power to heal, save, and restore. The Cave of Treasures. High in the ancient mountains, beyond the reach of Cain's violent descendants, Seth discovers a sacred cavern that will shape human destiny for generations. The Cave of Treasures becomes more than shelter from storms or storage for valuable objects. It becomes sanctuary where divine purposes are preserved through humanity's darkest centuries. According to Eastern Christian traditions, this cave originates with Adam himself. Before his death, the first man receives divine revelation about treasures that must be preserved for future generations. Not gold or silver, though these have their place, but treasures of far greater value, sacred relics that connect humanity to its divine origins and point toward its ultimate destiny. Adam entrusts these treasures to Seth because of his proven faithfulness. The journey to Eden's gates demonstrated Seth's reliability under pressure. His acceptance of divine will, despite personal disappointment, proved his spiritual maturity. His commitment to preserving hope, despite present suffering, marked him as suitable guardian for humanity's most precious possessions. The treasures themselves carry profound symbolic meaning. Gold represents divine glory that once filled Eden and will someday fill the earth again. Frankincense symbolizes prayers of the righteous, rising like incense before the divine throne. Myrrh foreshadows the suffering through which redemption will eventually come. Together, these three substances tell the complete story of divine purpose in human history. But the cave holds more than symbolic metals and spices. Adam's own body rests there, preserved according to divine instructions for future resurrection. His physical remains serve as reminder that human identity includes material as well as spiritual dimensions. Death may separate soul from body temporarily, but divine purposes include restoration of complete human nature. Seth establishes careful protocols for accessing the cave and its treasures. Only certain individuals may enter. Only specific rituals may be performed there. Only approved purposes justify using the sacred objects. These restrictions protect the treasures from misuse while ensuring their availability for legitimate spiritual needs. The cave becomes pilgrimage destination for the righteous. Throughout the pre-flood era, families journey from distant settlements to offer prayers at Adam's tomb, to seek divine guidance through contact with sacred objects, to teach their children about humanity's origins and destiny. The long, difficult journey itself becomes spiritual discipline that prepares hearts for divine encounter. Worship services in the cave follow patterns established by Seth under divine guidance. Songs that Adam learned in Eden echo through the cavern's chambers. Prayers that preserve divine names and attributes rise toward heaven through natural openings in the rock. Ceremonies that reenact divine promises provide hope for those facing present difficulties. The acoustic properties of the cave enhance these worship experiences. Voices carry farther and sound richer than in open air. Musical instruments produce deeper resonances. Even whispered prayers seem to gain power from the sacred space. The cave itself becomes instrument of worship that amplifies human devotion. Seth trains selected individuals to serve as guardians of the cave and its treasures. These caretakers commit their lives to preserving the sacred objects and maintaining proper worship practices. They memorize the stories associated with each treasure. They learn the rituals required for different spiritual needs. They prepare for the day when the treasures will fulfill their ultimate purpose. According to the tradition, these treasures will eventually travel to honor the promised deliverer. The gold will acknowledge his divine kingship. The frankincense will recognize his perfect priesthood. The myrrh will foresee his redemptive suffering. The cave serves as storage facility for gifts that will be presented centuries later at the Messiah's birth. The preservation of these treasures through flood and dispersion requires careful planning across generations. Each guardian must train reliable successors. Each generation must maintain the traditions and knowledge necessary for proper care. The responsibility passes from father to son through the righteous lineage that traces back to Seth himself. Genealogical records preserved in the cave document the transmission of this sacred trust through the centuries. Noah receives the treasures before the flood. Shem carries them through the post-flood world. Abraham's descendants maintain the tradition through their wanderings. The line of preservation parallels the line of divine promise through history. The cave also serves as library for preserving non-material treasures, oral traditions that connect back to Eden itself, prophecies received through divine revelation, wisdom gained through centuries of faithful living. This knowledge proves as valuable as any physical object for maintaining human connection to divine purposes. Maps carved into the cave walls show the locations of other sacred sites, where Adam first offered sacrifice after leaving Eden, where Enoch walked with God before his translation, where divine appearances occurred to the righteous patriarchs. The cave becomes geographical center for understanding sacred history across the ancient world. Astronomical observations recorded in the cave provide practical knowledge for agriculture and navigation. The movements of stars and seasons that Adam observed in Eden continue in predictable patterns. Understanding these cycles helps Seth's descendants plan their activities in harmony with divine order built into creation itself. Medical knowledge preserved in the cave includes information about healing properties of various plants and minerals. Some of this wisdom comes from experience gained through trial and error, but some derives from divine instruction given to Adam about creation's healing potential. This knowledge serves the community's health needs while pointing toward ultimate healing through divine intervention. The cave's treasures also include tools and technologies that will be needed for future events. Instructions for building altars according to divine specifications. Techniques for preparing sacrifices that please God. Methods for constructing sacred objects that facilitate proper worship. This practical knowledge ensures continuity in religious practice across changing circumstances. During times of persecution, the cave provides refuge for the righteous who face violence from Cain's descendants. Its remote location and difficult access protect those who seek shelter there. Its sacred nature discourages enemies from pursuing fugitives into its depths. The treasures provide resources for sustaining refugees until danger passes. The tradition of the Cave of Treasures demonstrates how physical objects can serve spiritual purposes when properly understood and used. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh are valuable commodities in any age, but their greatest worth lies in their symbolic meaning and prophetic significance. They represent divine realities that transcend material value. Seth's role as guardian of these treasures establishes pattern for spiritual leadership that emphasizes service rather than power. He does not own the treasures for personal benefit. He preserves them for divine purposes that extend far beyond his own lifetime. His guardianship models the kind of stewardship that God expects from all who receive divine gifts and responsibilities. Ancient echoes, Seth and Egypt. Deep in the shadow of the pyramids, strange whispers echo through time. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of Set, the god of chaos and storms. Yet beneath this dark figure lies something more complex. Some scholars wonder if distant memories of Seth, son of Adam, somehow filtered into Egyptian myth across the centuries. The connections seem fragile at first. Set battles his brother Osiris in Egyptian lore, just as Seth's lines stood apart from Cain's violent path. But where biblical Seth brought order and worship, Egyptian Set embodied discord. The names share similar sounds, yet their natures appear opposite. Ancient Egyptian records tell of foreign peoples entering the Nile Valley in earliest times. These newcomers brought stories, traditions, and memories of their ancestors. Among them may have been tales of the righteous son who replaced the fallen brother. Over generations, these stories transformed. What began as memory of Seth the faithful became Seth the turbulent. The transformation follows a pattern seen throughout history. Sacred stories travel across cultures, changing shape as they move. The original Seth, quiet, faithful, chosen by God, enters new lands and new languages. Local customs reshape his image. Cultural needs redefine his purpose. Soon the peaceful son becomes something entirely different. Egyptian texts from the earliest dynasties hint at this process. They speak of ancient wisdom coming from the east, carried by wandering peoples. These groups settled in the delta regions, bringing their gods and stories with them. Their tales mixed with local beliefs, creating new myths from old truths. The timing aligns with biblical chronology in curious ways. If Seth's descendants spread across the ancient world before the flood, their stories would have survived in scattered forms. Egyptian civilization rising after the Great Deluge may have preserved these fragments in altered form. The righteous Seth became the chaotic Set through generations of retelling. Archaeological evidence supports this pattern of cultural mixing. Pre-dynastic Egyptian artifacts show influences from Mesopotamian regions where biblical events unfolded. Trade routes carried more than goods. They transported stories, beliefs, and memories of ancient times. Seth's legacy may have traveled these same paths, becoming Egyptian Set along the way. The contrast between biblical Seth and Egyptian Set reveals how stories adapt to serve different purposes. Egypt needed gods who explained conflict and justified royal power. The peaceful Seth would not suit these needs. Therefore he became Set, still powerful, still significant, but serving Egypt's cultural requirements rather than preserving his original nature. Yet traces of the original Seth persist even in Egyptian myth. Set is not purely evil but serves divine purposes within cosmic order. He protects the sun god's boat during its nightly journey through the underworld. This protective role echoes Seth's biblical function as guardian of the righteous line. Both figures, in their own ways, preserve something precious against dark forces. The linguistic connections grow stronger upon closer examination. Ancient Egyptian and Hebrew share common Semitic roots. Names and concepts cross between these languages more easily than modern scholars once believed. Seth's name could naturally become Set through normal phonetic changes over centuries of cultural contact. Other parallels emerge from careful study. Both Seth and Set are associated with divine appointment and special selection. Both stand apart from their brothers in significant ways. Both carry responsibilities that affect the entire cosmic order. These deeper similarities suggest genuine historical connections beneath surface differences. The Egyptian texts preserve one particularly striking detail. Set is sometimes called the Appointed One, a title that mirrors Eve's words when Seth was born. She declared that God had appointed another seed to replace Abel. This shared concept of divine appointment hints at common origins for both figures. Modern Egyptologists continue debating these connections. Some see pure coincidence in the similarities. Others argue for genuine historical links between biblical traditions and Egyptian mythology. The evidence allows for both interpretations, leaving room for wonder about how ancient stories traveled and transformed. What seems certain is that Seth's influence extended far beyond the pages of Scripture. His story, like ripples in still water, spread outward across the ancient world. Each culture it touched preserved some fragment of the original truth, even as it adapted that truth to local needs and understandings. The sons of God and the daughters of men. A darkness begins to creep across the earth. The line of Seth, once pure and separate, starts to weaken. Ancient texts describe a cosmic seduction that will doom the world. The sons of God look upon the daughters of men and find them beautiful. This simple phrase carries the weight of humanity's greatest catastrophe. The identity of these sons of God has puzzled scholars for millennia. Some traditions identify them as angels who abandoned their heavenly stations. Others see them as descendants of Seth who forgot their sacred calling. Both interpretations point to the same tragic result, the breakdown of divine order on earth. Seth's lineage had maintained its separation from Cain's violent descendants for generations. They dwelt apart in the mountains, close to God, preserving the memory of Eden and the hope of restoration. Their lives were marked by worship, righteousness, and divine communion. They were the appointed guardians of spiritual truth in a darkening world. But isolation breeds curiosity. As centuries passed, some among Seth's descendants began to wonder about life in the valleys below. There, Cain's children had built glittering cities filled with art, music, and technological marvels. Their women were beautiful, their culture sophisticated, their lives seemingly full of pleasure and ease. The temptation grew stronger with each generation. Young men from Seth's line would venture down from the sacred mountains. At first, they came only to trade or observe. They told themselves they would remain separate, untouched by the corruption below. They believed their righteousness would protect them from moral contamination. Gradually, the boundaries dissolved. Marriages began between the two lines. Seth's descendants, chosen to preserve divine truth, united themselves with those who had rejected God's ways. The ancient separation that had protected both bloodlines suddenly collapsed. Sacred and profane merged into something neither purely holy nor completely corrupt. The results exceeded anyone's worst fears. From these unions came children of unusual size and strength. beings the texts call Nephilim, or fallen ones. These giants inherited physical power from their mother's bloodline and spiritual knowledge from their father's heritage. They used both gifts for destruction rather than blessing. The Nephilim became warlords and tyrants. Their unnatural strength allowed them to dominate normal humans. Their inherited knowledge gave them access to secrets that should have remained hidden. They taught forbidden arts, sorcery, warfare, and technologies too dangerous for fallen humanity to possess. Violence multiplied across the earth under their influence. Divine knowledge, meant to uplift and bless, became a tool of oppression in their hands. They perverted worship into dark rituals. They turned healing arts into instruments of harm. They used their understanding of natural forces to terrorize and control. What God had intended for good became weaponized for evil. The corruption spread like a plague. Cities that had once produced beautiful art now created monuments to cruelty. Technologies that could have blessed humanity served only to enhance suffering. Even the earth itself seemed to revolt against the perverted order the Nephilim established. Natural disasters increased as creation groaned under the weight of cosmic rebellion. Seth's remaining descendants found themselves overwhelmed by the tide of corruption. Their small communities of faithful worshippers dwindled as more young people abandoned the mountains for the attractions below. The sacred traditions that had preserved divine truth for centuries began to fade. Knowledge of God grew dim as the light of righteousness flickered toward extinction. Yet not all was lost. A faithful remnant remained, led by figures like Enoch and later Noah. These few preserved the essential truths even as darkness engulfed the world around them. They maintained the sacred flame that would eventually kindle hope in a new world after judgment cleansed the old. The angelic interpretation of this story adds another layer of cosmic tragedy. If the sons of God were indeed heavenly beings, then their fall represents a catastrophe that transcended human failure. Angels who had witnessed divine glory chose earthly pleasure over eternal purpose. Their rebellion contaminated not just humanity, but the very boundary between heaven and earth. Ancient texts, like the Book of Enoch, elaborate on this cosmic disaster. They describe how fallen angels taught humans forbidden knowledge, the secrets of metallurgy for making weapons, cosmetics for enhancing beauty, astronomy for practicing magic. Each gift corrupted its recipient, leading humanity further from divine purpose into selfish ambition. The timing of this catastrophe proved crucial for human history. It occurred after centuries of growth and development, but before divine judgment could be forsaken. Humanity had advanced enough to make the corruption truly dangerous, but had not yet reached the point where redemption became impossible. The flood would arrive just as the last hope seemed ready to expire. This period represents the first great test of human nature under divine election. Seth's line had been chosen, blessed, and set apart. They possessed every advantage for maintaining righteousness, yet they chose to abandon their calling for temporary pleasures. Their failure demonstrated that divine election alone could not guarantee faithfulness without continued submission to God's will. Warnings of the flood. The signs multiply across a darkening world. Prophets rise among the few who still remember God's voice. Their warnings echo through valleys where giants rule and corruption spreads like wildfire. The most faithful among Seth's descendants receive visions of coming judgment. Water will cover the earth. Only those who heed the warning will survive. Enoch stands as the greatest of these prophetic voices. His walks with God have shown him visions of cosmic justice. He sees the corruption that poisons creation and understands its inevitable end. His prophecies speak of divine wrath stored up for the ungodly. The earth itself cries out for cleansing from the violence that stains its soil. The prophet's words carry supernatural authority. When Enoch speaks, creation itself seems to listen. Birds fall silent. Winds cease their blowing. Even the Nephilim pause their violence when his voice rings across the land. Yet few truly understand the magnitude of what approaches. Most dismiss his warnings as the ravings of a mountain mystic. Ancient texts preserve fragments of these early prophecies. They speak of waters rising higher than the highest peaks. They describe a cosmic reset that will wash away every trace of current civilization. They promise salvation for the righteous while pronouncing doom upon the wicked. The specificity of these visions suggests divine revelation rather than human speculation. Enoch's prophetic ministry spans decades, growing more urgent as corruption increases. He travels from the sacred mountains down into the polluted valleys. His messages adapt to each audience while maintaining their essential truth. To the Nephilim, he proclaims coming judgment. To the remnant of Seth's line, he offers hope for preservation through obedience. The prophet's method of receiving revelation sets him apart from ordinary human experience. He does not merely hear God's voice, but walks in divine presence. These encounters transport him beyond normal reality into heavenly realms. There he witnesses the preparations for judgment already underway in cosmic courts of justice. His visions reveal the spiritual machinery behind coming destruction. Angels receive their commissions to execute divine wrath. Heavenly storehouses prepare the waters of judgment. Even the calendar of destruction becomes clear, though Enoch shares these specific details only with his most faithful followers. The content of Enoch's prophecies extends beyond simple warnings of flood. He describes the spiritual reasons for judgment. Humanity has corrupted the divine image through mingling with fallen beings. The earth has been polluted by innocent blood. Knowledge, meant for blessing, has been perverted into cursing. Creation itself demands cleansing. Yet mercy mingles with justice in these prophetic messages. Enoch speaks not only of destruction but of preservation. A righteous remnant will survive the coming deluge. From them, God will rebuild human civilization on pure foundations. The flood represents not an ending but a new beginning for humanity's relationship with the divine. Other prophets join Enoch's voice as the crisis deepens. Methuselah, his son, continues the prophetic tradition. His extraordinarily long life serves as a living sign of divine patience. As long as Methuselah lives, judgment remains delayed. His eventual death will signal that the time of grace has ended. The prophetic warnings grow more specific as the flood approaches. Enoch's visions reveal the chosen instrument of preservation. One man from Seth's pure lineage will receive divine instructions for survival. This chosen one will build a vessel capable of preserving life through the coming catastrophe. His obedience will determine whether humanity has any future at all. The prophecies also address the scope of coming judgment. The flood will be universal, covering every part of the inhabited earth. No mountain will remain above the waters. No refuge will escape the divine wrath. Only those within the divinely designed vessel will survive to see the new world that follows destruction. Enoch's final prophecies speak of what lies beyond the flood. The cleansed earth will receive a new covenant. Humanity will begin again with knowledge of divine justice. The memory of judgment will serve as warning for future generations. Yet the tendency toward corruption will remain, requiring continued vigilance and divine grace. The prophet's mysterious departure from earth serves as the ultimate validation of his message. God takes Enoch directly into divine presence without experiencing death. This translation demonstrates that the spiritual realities he proclaimed are genuine. His removal from earth also signals that the time for warnings is ending. Soon, only judgment will remain. The scattered remnant of Seth's faithful descendants treasure these prophetic warnings. They share them in whispered conversations during the darkest hours. Some begin making practical preparations based on Enoch's visions. They gather supplies, strengthen their families, and intensify their worship. They sense that the old world is ending and a new one must soon begin. Yet even among the faithful, doubt sometimes creeps in. Generations have heard warnings of coming judgment. Life continues its normal patterns despite prophetic urgency. The human heart struggles to comprehend catastrophe on the scale Enoch describes. This psychological resistance will make Noah's eventual obedience even more remarkable. Enter Noah. In the 10th generation from Adam, hope takes human form. Noah enters a world teetering on the edge of divine judgment. Born into Seth's faithful lineage, he carries within his blood the memory of Eden and the promise of redemption. His very name whispers of comfort and rest, qualities desperately needed in a time of cosmic upheaval. His father, Lamech, prophesies over the newborn child. This son will bring relief from the curse that has plagued the earth since Adam's fall. Through him, the ground will yield its increase again. The labor that has grown harsh under divine judgment will become bearable once more. These words prove more prophetic than anyone could imagine. Noah grows up hearing stories of the ancient days when men walked closer to God. His grandfather, Methuselah, still alive after 9 centuries, remembers when the line of Seth maintained its separation from corruption. The old man's tales paint pictures of a purer time when divine presence felt near and righteousness seemed achievable. The young Noah witnesses the accelerating decay around him. Giants roam the valleys below his mountain home. Violence erupts daily in the cities of the plains. Even among his own people, fewer maintain the ancient ways of worship and separation. The darkness that Enoch prophesied continues to spread across the inhabited world. Yet something sets Noah apart from his contemporaries. While others drift toward compromise, he moves deeper into faithfulness. Where his generation abandons the old ways, he embraces them more fully. His righteousness stands out like a beacon in the gathering gloom. God takes notice of this solitary figure, walking uprightly in a corrupt generation. The divine evaluation of Noah's character becomes crucial for humanity's survival. Scripture records that God finds him righteous in his generation, not perfect by absolute standards, but faithful among the unfaithful. His integrity preserves him when divine wrath consumes everyone else. His obedience qualifies him to become the new father of humanity after judgment cleanses the earth. Noah's righteousness manifests in practical ways. He maintains justice in his business dealings when others cheat and steal. He speaks truth when lies seem more profitable. He worships God alone, while his neighbors bow to created things. His family life reflects divine order when chaos rules everywhere else. This moral consistency attracts divine attention at precisely the right moment. God needs a partner for the great work of preservation and renewal. The cosmic plan requires a human agent who can be trusted with enormous responsibility. Noah's proven character qualifies him for this unprecedented role in sacred history. The selection of Noah reveals divine methods in working through history. God rarely chooses the powerful or famous for the most important tasks. Instead, divine preference falls upon the faithful and obscure. Noah possesses no armies, rules no cities, commands no vast resources. He has only integrity, obedience, and willingness to trust divine instructions, even when they seem impossible. His age, when chosen, 600 years old, speaks to divine patience and human longevity in the antediluvian world. Noah has had centuries to prove his character. His righteousness has been tested through long decades of watching corruption increase. He has remained faithful while others around him abandoned the ancient ways. The divine choice of Noah also demonstrates God's commitment to preserving the line of Seth. Despite widespread apostasy among the chosen lineage, God will not allow it to perish completely. One faithful man becomes the bridge between the old world and the new. Through him, the promises made to Seth will survive the coming catastrophe. Noah's selection carries enormous responsibility. Upon his obedience hangs the survival of every living creature. His willingness to follow divine instructions, no matter how strange they seem, will determine whether humanity has any future. The weight of this calling would crush an ordinary man. Noah's exceptional character enables him to bear it. The timing of Noah's calling proves crucial. He receives his divine commission just as corruption reaches its peak. The Nephilim have established their dominion over most of the earth. Violence fills the land from one end to the other. The few remaining righteous people feel overwhelmed by the tide of evil. Into this desperate situation, God speaks to his chosen servant. The initial divine communication to Noah must have seemed both terrifying and wonderful. After generations of increasing silence from heaven, God speaks clearly again. The voice that walked with Adam in Eden, that accepted Abel's sacrifice, that translated Enoch into glory, now addresses Noah directly. The intimacy of this communication validates Noah's lifelong faithfulness. God's message to Noah combines warning with promise. Judgment is coming upon the earth, but preservation is also planned. Destruction will be universal, but salvation will be provided for those who obey divine instructions. The old world will end, but a new world will begin. Noah stands at the hinge point between two eras of human history. The divine plan revealed to Noah demonstrates both justice and mercy. Justice demands that corruption be cleansed from creation. Mercy provides a way for life to continue beyond judgment. Noah becomes the instrument through which both divine attributes find expression. His obedience enables God to be both just and merciful simultaneously. The building of the ark. God speaks with mathematical precision. The vessel must measure 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high, 3 decks, 1 window, 1 door. The specifications flow from divine wisdom, perfectly calculated for the task ahead. Noah receives blueprints that no human mind could have devised. Every measurement serves a purpose in the grand design of preservation. The instructions seem impossible at first. Build a ship where no large body of water exists. Construct a floating zoo in a world that has never seen such rain. Stock provisions for creatures that have never needed rescue. The project appears to be madness to anyone observing from the outside. Yet Noah begins without hesitation or question. The work demands resources beyond any individual's normal means. Massive timbers must be harvested from distant forests. Pitch must be gathered to waterproof the enormous hull. Tools must be forged for construction on this unprecedented scale. Noah's family contributes labor, but the project requires divine provision to succeed. Decades pass as the great vessel slowly takes shape. Noah ages from 600 years toward his date with destiny. His hands grow calloused from constant construction work. His back bends under the weight of countless timber loads. Yet his determination never wavers. He builds as one who has heard the voice of the Almighty. The physical challenges pale beside the emotional burden. Neighbors mock the strange ship rising in their midst. Former friends question Noah's sanity. Even some family members wonder if the old man has lost his mind. The ridicule grows louder with each passing year, as the ark grows larger and the promised flood fails to appear. Noah's faithfulness during this period demonstrates the depth of his trust in divine revelation. He continues building when evidence suggests folly. He persists when mockery becomes persecution. He maintains hope when natural circumstances offer no support for his actions. His obedience transcends human reason and rests purely on divine promise. The construction process teaches Noah about divine methods. God could have created the ark instantly through miraculous power. Instead, the divine plan requires human cooperation and decades of faithful work. The building period serves as a time of preparation for both Noah and the watching world. It offers opportunity for repentance that goes largely ignored. As the ark nears completion, its massive size becomes undeniable. The vessel dwarfs any structure previously built by human hands. Its proportions suggest purposes beyond normal understanding. Thoughtful observers begin to wonder if Noah might actually know something they have missed. Yet most continue to dismiss the project as elaborate delusion. The ark's design reveals divine engineering beyond human capabilities. Its dimensions provide optimal stability for riding out violent storms. Its compartment system allows for efficient organization of countless animal species. Its ventilation system ensures adequate air circulation throughout the vessel. Every detail reflects supernatural wisdom applied to natural principles. Noah's family becomes his primary workforce as the project progresses. His sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, contribute their strength to the massive undertaking. Their wives help prepare the interior spaces and gather supplies. The whole family unit commits to the divine mission despite social pressure to abandon the seemingly impossible task. The waterproofing process requires special attention. The vessel must remain tight against waters more violent than any ship has ever faced. Pitch covers every joint and seam. Multiple coats ensure complete protection against the coming deluge. Noah understands that any leak could prove fatal to the precious cargo he will carry. Years of construction develop Noah's skills as a master craftsman. He learns techniques for working with massive timbers. He masters the art of creating watertight joints. He develops systems for moving heavy materials efficiently. The project transforms him from farmer to shipwright through necessity and divine guidance. The ark's completion approaches as Noah celebrates his 600th birthday. Every plank fits perfectly in its appointed place. Every joint holds firm against stress testing. Every compartment stands ready to receive its designated occupants. The vessel represents 6 decades of faithful obedience, crystallized into physical form. Divine timing proves perfect in every detail. The ark reaches completion just as corruption on earth reaches its peak. Noah finishes his building just as God's patience reaches its end. The vessel stands ready just as the moment for judgment arrives. Human obedience and divine justice converge at precisely the right moment. The completed ark serves as a monument to faith in an age of skepticism. It demonstrates that divine commands, however strange they may seem, deserve absolute obedience. It proves that God's promises remain true even when circumstances suggest otherwise. It stands as witness that divine wisdom surpasses human understanding in every generation. Local inhabitants continue their normal activities despite the massive ship in their midst. They plant crops for harvests they will never reap. They make plans for futures that will never arrive. They ignore the clearest possible warning of coming judgment. Their blindness to obvious signs reveals how completely corruption has darkened human understanding. Noah's building project transforms from act of faith into instrument of salvation. What began as obedience to seemingly impossible divine commands becomes the vessel that preserves life through catastrophic judgment. The ark represents the principle that divine instructions, however strange they appear, always serve purposes beyond human comprehension. The deluge. Rain begins to fall. Not the gentle showers that water the earth in normal times, but drops that strike like hammers against the ark's sealed deck. The sky darkens until day becomes indistinguishable from night. What starts as unusual weather quickly reveals itself as something far more catastrophic. The fountains of the great deep burst open, the windows of heaven swing wide. Water descends from above while simultaneously erupting from below. Noah and his family huddle inside the vessel that has been their obsession for decades. The sounds outside grow terrifying. Water pounds against the ark's sides with increasing fury. The great ship begins to move, lifted by rising floods from its dry resting place. For the first time since construction began, the massive vessel serves its intended purpose. The waters rise with supernatural speed. Valleys fill first, then hills disappear beneath the swelling flood. The cities of the plains, with all their violence and corruption, vanish under divine judgment. The giants who terrorize the earth find their great strength useless against the relentless tide. Everything that breathes air begins to perish as the water level continues climbing. Inside the ark, Noah's family experiences terror mixed with vindication. Their decades of faith now prove justified, but at an almost unbearable cost. Through the single window, they witness the destruction of everything familiar. The world they knew dissolves into chaos and death. Only their obedience to divine command preserves them from sharing the common fate. The animals within the ark sense the cosmic upheaval around them. Creatures that would normally flee from predators huddle together in shared terror. The divine peace that brought them to Noah maintains order within the vessel. Even as chaos reigns outside, their survival depends entirely on the floating sanctuary God designed for this moment. 40 days of rain represents only the beginning. The waters continue rising long after the initial deluge ends. Every mountain peak disappears beneath the universal flood. The highest hills become unmarked graves. The earth transforms into a boundless ocean with no visible landmarks remaining. The old world has been erased completely. The psychological pressure on Noah's family grows almost unbearable. They are the sole human survivors of a cosmic catastrophe. Everyone they have ever known outside their immediate family has perished. The isolation feels complete and terrifying. They float alone on an endless sea, trusting only in divine promise that dry land will someday reappear. Months pass in this aquatic wilderness. The ark becomes their entire universe, holding all remaining life on earth. Day follows day with no change in the endless water stretching to every horizon. Time seems suspended between the world that was and the world that might yet be. They exist in a liminal space between destruction and recreation. The physical challenges of life aboard the ark multiply as weeks become months. Food supplies require careful rationing. Animal waste must be managed despite cramped quarters. Fresh water becomes precious despite the flood surrounding them. Every aspect of survival demands constant attention and divine provision. Divine remembrance breaks the stalemate. God brings Noah to mind. along with every living thing that shares the ark with him. This divine remembering sets in motion the cosmic forces that will reverse the flood's devastation. Wind sweeps across the surface of the waters. The deep fountains seal themselves shut. Heaven's windows close firmly. The universal ocean starts its gradual retreat. After floating for 150 days, the ark settles onto the Ararat mountain range. That gentle contact with solid earth delivers the first glimmer of hope that their trial might be drawing to a close. Still, water extends as far as their eyes can see in every direction. Land exists somewhere under the flood, though whether it will ever emerge again stays unknown. Noah releases birds to assess the conditions. A raven flies to and fro, discovering no place to land. A dove comes back without success on its initial journey. 7 days afterward, that same dove returns carrying an olive leaf, the first evidence that plant life has started recovering. Another week passes before the dove doesn't come back, showing that livable habitat has been re-established. Their lengthy imprisonment finally concludes after spending more than a year sealed inside the ark. Noah takes off the covering and observes dry land extending outward from their mountain sanctuary. The world looks vastly different from what they recall. Every familiar feature has been wiped away. Fresh terrain has appeared from under the retreating waters. They face learning how to exist in a transformed creation. The initial action following their departure from the ark establishes the character of this new world. Noah constructs an altar and presents sacrifices using the clean animals. Sweet smoke ascends toward God like fragrant incense, bearing thankfulness for their preservation and petitions for divine favor on this new beginning. This act of worship creates the correct relationship between the Creator and his creatures in the world after the flood. God's response to Noah's offering sets new guidelines for the world's continuation. God vows never to destroy the earth through flooding again. The rainbow emerges as evidence of this promise, visible to all future generations. The seasons will maintain their predictable pattern. Planting and harvesting will persist as long as earth remains. However, the flood alters more than just the landscape. The world before the deluge, characterized by extended lifespans and direct contact with the divine, has come to an end. Human life expectancy starts its continuous decrease from hundreds of years down to mere decades. The closeness between heaven and earth, wounded by humanity's first sin and demolished by widespread evil, won't be completely repaired until a greater rescue arrives. The flood's judgment reveals both God's justice and his compassion. Justice requires that evil be purged from the world. Compassion offers rescue to those who place their trust in divine promises. Noah's family creates a connection between the world that warranted judgment and the world receiving another opportunity. Through them, humanity gets the chance to start over. Aftermath and fresh starts. The world lies vacant and quiet. Floodwaters have pulled back, leaving a landscape washed clean of its previous wickedness. Noah's household stands isolated on Mount Ararat, 8 people who now must reconstruct human society from scratch. The assignment appears daunting. They have no urban centers, no collected wisdom, no settled traditions. Everything needs to start again from the beginning. God speaks into this untouched emptiness with declarations of favor and responsibility. The divine instruction once given to Adam now echoes for Noah and those who will follow him. Reproduce and increase in number. Populate the world and bring it under control. Exercise authority over all living things. Humanity's original mission stays the same despite the flood's catastrophic disruption. Nevertheless, subtle shifts characterize this fresh beginning. Death becomes more deeply woven into the natural system than previously. Animals will experience fear of humans in ways they never did before. Allowing meat consumption acknowledges that violence has become woven into nature's rhythm. The Rainbow Promise guarantees no more worldwide floods, but also acknowledges that such severe judgment had become essential. Noah's opening action makes worship the cornerstone of the new reality. The altar assembled from stones collected on the mountain becomes humanity's first place of worship following the flood. Smoke from the burning offerings climbs into the purified air, carrying expressions of gratitude and appeals for heavenly blessing. This emphasis on worship establishes the correct priority for all that comes next. The practical demands of staying alive require urgent focus. Food needs to be located or cultivated in a terrain reshaped by the deluge. Protection from the elements must be constructed using whatever resources the ravaged world offers. Animals need freedom to reproduce and disperse throughout the vacant landmasses. The work of replenishing and reconstructing commences right away. Noah plants grapevines in this new reality, attempting to restore some recognizable comfort from before. The vines take root in earth made fertile by the decomposed remains of a drowned world. When the grapes ripen, Noah experiences wine for the first time since boarding the ark. Perhaps overwhelmed by relief at having survived, or attempting to block out the terrible things he witnessed, he consumes too much and collapses into a disgraceful drunken state. This episode shows that human character came through the flood unaltered. The moral decay that necessitated judgment still dwells in the hearts of those who were saved. Noah's righteousness carried him through disaster, but didn't remake him into someone perfectly virtuous. The new reality will confront the identical moral struggles that obliterated the old one. Ham's reaction to finding his father exposed reveals how rapidly sin reasserts its presence. Rather than covering Noah's disgrace with discretion, Ham reveals it to his brothers. This disrespectful action toward his father mirrors the contempt that marked the world before the flood. The cycle of corruption starts repeating within just one generation after salvation. Shem and Japheth address the situation with appropriate respect. They move backward to cover their father while avoiding seeing his shame. This respectful conduct earns them favor while Ham's descendants receive prophetic consequences. Even in this renewed world, decisions regarding honor and disrespect produce enduring effects on whole family branches. Noah's prophetic declarations concerning his 3 sons influence the future course of human society. Shem gains favor as the one who will carry forward divine intention. Japheth will grow and find dwelling in Shem's territory, implying cooperation and mutual benefit. Ham's offspring Canaan encounters servitude, representing the price of dishonoring one's father and, by implication, heavenly authority. The agreement made with Noah reaches past his immediate household to include all of creation. God commits to never destroying the earth by flood regardless of how humans conduct themselves. This one-sided pledge guarantees stability for the natural world. Seasons will follow their rhythms. The ground will stay productive. The fundamental requirements for society are secured. The rainbow functions as a tangible symbol of this universal agreement. Whenever storm clouds accumulate and threaten destructive rainfall, the multicolored arc emerges as a reminder of divine self-restraint. Children throughout all time will witness this symbol and learn the account of judgment survived through divine compassion. The visible marker keeps alive the memory of both catastrophe and deliverance. Human life expectancy begins its slow reduction in the world after the flood. Noah reaches 950 years, nearly equaling the longevity seen before the deluge, but those who come after him live progressively shorter lives. This transformation might stem from environmental shifts in the renewed world, or it could express divine kindness by limiting time spent in a fallen state. Whatever the reason, this change signals a clear divide between the former world and the new one. Noah's family spread across the planet accomplishes the divine instruction to populate and master it. From the Ararat highlands, they move in every direction. Each branch takes with them recollections of the flood and the promise that came afterward. These narratives become the founding stories of cultures throughout the world, maintaining echoes of the catastrophic judgment and miraculous rescue. Archaeological findings point toward sudden climate transformation following some ancient devastating occurrence. Ice ages transition, ocean heights change, land formations settle into their present arrangement. Though these developments could have natural causes, they correspond remarkably with the biblical description of a world-altering flood followed by slow restoration. The renewed world gives humanity an unmarked beginning but also preserves the teachings from the old one. Divine justice can't be defied forever. Wickedness produces results that ultimately require settlement. Yet divine compassion offers rescue for those who place their confidence in God and follow His ways. These lessons absorbed through catastrophe shape human conduct in the ages that come after. Cultural recollections of the catastrophic flood endure in societies across the globe. From ancient Middle Eastern tales to indigenous American accounts, narratives of universal judgment through water surface in virtually every human culture. These common stories point toward shared memory of an authentic historical occurrence maintained in spoken tradition throughout the ages of human migration from a single origin. Seth's inheritance through Shem among Noah's 3 children. Shem bears the most holy legacy. His name signifies reputation or renown, pointing to the honor that will pass through his family tree. The favor spoken over him by his father identifies him as the carrier through whom divine intention will advance. Through Shem, the spiritual heritage of Seth discovers its expression after the flood. The ancestral records follow divine promise through Shem's offspring with meticulous attention. From him emerges Arphaxad, followed by Shelah, then Eber, whose designation produces the term Hebrew. Every generation keeps the sacred link intact despite the difficulties of rebuilding society in a changed landscape. The lineage of promise endures both flood and the cultural forces of unfamiliar environments. Shem's offspring establish themselves in territories to the east of the Mediterranean, in areas that will eventually be called Mesopotamia and Canaan. Their settlement choices prove divinely guided, positioning them where ancient commerce routes intersect. From these key locations, the impact of Seth's spiritual inheritance can extend throughout the developing civilization. The Tower of Babel occurrence challenges Shem's descendants in ways that recall the corruption before the flood. Humanity combines in defiance of the divine instruction to disperse throughout the world. Rather than populating and controlling the earth, they assemble to construct a tribute to their own magnificence. The enormous tower embodies the identical arrogance that defined Cain's offspring before the deluge. Divine action disperses those who would build the tower through linguistic confusion. This judgment protects the world from a premature unity founded on rebellion instead of virtue. Shem's descendants, likely continuing their dedication to divine instructions, obtain their distinct language and region. They preserve the tradition of genuine worship, while other communities slide into false religion. The cultural preservation through Shem's branch maintains crucial truths that could otherwise disappear. Accounts of creation, humanity's fall, the flood, and the covenant transfer from fathers to sons across the generations. These spoken traditions keep their precision through deliberate repetition and profound respect for ancestral knowledge. The spiritual inheritance holds greater worth than physical riches. Shem himself survives 500 years beyond the flood, witnessing his offspring spread throughout extensive regions. His prolonged life allows him to connect the world before the flood with the developing societies of the new earth. His recollections of ancient evil and divine punishment offer warnings to those who come later. The genealogical documentation reveals a consistent decrease in life expectancy among Shem's offspring. Though Noah survived nearly 1,000 years, his great-great-grandson Peleg witnesses only 239 years. This progressive shortening of existence might reflect environmental transformations in the world after the flood, or it could demonstrate divine kindness by reducing exposure to fallen circumstances. 10 generations following Noah, Abraham appears from Shem's family tree in the city of Ur. His summons by the divine voice represents a pivotal moment in maintaining Seth's spiritual inheritance. Through Abraham, the dispersed memory of authentic worship will be concentrated into a selected people. The commitment given to Seth will find fresh expression through the agreement with Abraham and his descendants. Abraham's calling occurs at a significant time. It happens when memories of the flood have started fading. False worship spreads throughout the world as people lose sight of the lessons from divine judgment. Even in Mesopotamia, where memory ought to be most vivid, the veneration of counterfeit deities replaces reverence for the genuine Creator. Abraham's dedication shines like light in deepening shadows. Abraham's readiness to abandon his native land mirrors the separation that distinguished Seth's branch from the start. Just as Seth's offspring had previously lived apart from Cain's wicked society, Abraham removes himself from the idolatrous culture of his origin. He transforms into a wanderer in response to divine summons, trusting commitments that appear impossible to accomplish. The agreement formed with Abraham revives and broadens the promises embedded in Seth's designation. Abraham will father many peoples. His offspring will match the stars in multitude. Through his family line, every people group on earth will obtain favor. These extraordinary promises echo and magnify the expectation that started with Seth's arrival after Abel's murder. Isaac's arrival to aging parents shows divine ability to accomplish impossible commitments. Just as Seth had taken Abel's place after his murder, Isaac takes the place of the promised child who appeared impossible to conceive. The theme of divine provision extends across the ages, revealing that God's intentions can't be stopped by natural constraints or human shortcomings. The near offering of Isaac challenges Abraham's confidence in ways that mirror the ordeals confronted by Seth's branch throughout time. Abraham must select between natural attachment and heavenly instruction. His readiness to present his son shows the identical trust that allowed Noah to construct an ark on waterless ground. Dedication to divine revelation rises above human comprehension or inclination. Jacob's struggle with the heavenly messenger and his change into the one who contends with God advances the spiritual path that started with Seth. Like his ancestor who was chosen to take a fallen brother's place, Jacob obtains a fresh name and character through divine meeting. His 12 children become the founders of a selected nation that will maintain divine truth for all people. Joseph's account shows how divine guidance operates through seeming catastrophe to fulfill redemptive intention. His siblings' envy results in enslavement in Egypt. Nevertheless, this apparent disaster places him to rescue his household from starvation. The theme mirrors the broader narrative of Seth's descendants. Seeming reverses fulfill divine goals that only become evident looking backward. Jacob's household's survival in Egypt throughout the severe famine guarantees the continuation of Seth's spiritual inheritance at a critical juncture. Without Joseph's organizational skill and Pharaoh's goodwill, the chosen family tree might have died out. Divine care shields the bearers of promise, even when they remain unaware of the bigger purpose being accomplished. Jacob's offspring's multiplication in Egypt accomplishes the commitment of countless descendants while simultaneously establishing circumstances for future liberation. Their expansion from 70 people to possibly 2 million shows divine commitment to the agreement. Still, their ultimate enslavement also demonstrates that worldly situations can't ensure protection. Only divine favor offers final security. Moses comes forth from this enslaved community as the following major connection in Seth's spiritual sequence. His meeting with the burning thorn bush mirrors the divine interactions that directed Enoch, Noah, and Abraham. The God addressing Moses names himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the identical divine voice that has directed Seth's descendants throughout time. The departure from Egypt constitutes the most striking display of divine strength since the deluge. Through Moses, God frees his selected people from slavery and forms them into a nation. The instructions provided at Mount Sinai formalize the moral principles that Seth's offspring had maintained through verbal tradition. Written revelation adds to the spiritual legacy handed down through generations of dedicated households. From Seth to Christ, the Gospel of Luke follows in continuous connection from Adam through Seth to Jesus of Nazareth. This genealogical strand weaves through 77 generations, linking the chosen son of Eve to the anticipated Messiah. Each name constitutes a connection in the sequence of divine purpose that commenced when Seth took murdered Abel's position. Luke's thorough recording fulfills more than scholarly curiosity. The Gospel writer shows that Jesus belongs to the authentic spiritual family tree that has borne divine promise from the start. Through Seth's branch, the expectation of rescue has been maintained across thousands of years. In Christ, that ancient expectation discovers its complete realization. The theological importance of this link extends beyond simple ancestry. Seth was chosen to take Abel's place after Cain's brutality destroyed the initial effort at virtuous worship. Christ arrives to take Adam's place after wrongdoing destroyed humanity's initial bond with God. Both individuals function as divine selections to restore what disappeared through human failure. Early Christian authors acknowledged these similarities with deep understanding. They viewed Seth as a prefigurement of Christ, an individual whose existence and mission anticipated the greater rescue ahead. Where Seth maintained physical survival through the flood, Christ maintains spiritual survival through condemnation. Where Seth's descendant Noah rescued a small group in the ark, Christ rescues believers through his execution. Christ's arrival fulfills the identical theme of divine forbearance and action witnessed throughout Seth's family tree. Just as Noah emerged when evil reached its height, Christ steps into history when spiritual obscurity appears total. Roman control, religious pretense, and moral breakdown establish conditions ready for divine action. Christ's ancestry through Seth also highlights his complete humanity. He shares identical flesh and blood with every individual descended from Adam through the chosen branch. This authentic human character qualifies him to function as replacement for human wrongdoing. Only someone who genuinely belongs to the species can stand for the species before divine justice. Nevertheless, Christ surpasses his genealogical legacy in essential ways. Where every descendant of Seth bore the mark of inherited sin, Christ stays without sin through divine conception. Where Seth's family tree maintained truth through human custom, Christ personifies truth as the eternal expression made physical. Where earlier generations anticipated promised rescue, Christ delivers that rescue through his personal offering. The virgin conception maintains the Sethite family tree while rising above its constraints. Mary belongs to Seth's branch through her lineage. However, the Holy Spirit supplies the divine character that regular human reproduction can't provide. Christ receives the commitments given to Seth's offspring while holding the divine strength required to accomplish them entirely. Christ's work shows the identical themes that marked Seth's descendants throughout time. He distances himself from the corrupt religious system of his era, just as Seth's offspring maintained their separation from Cain's brutal society. He guards and communicates divine truth despite resistance, advancing the dedicated transmission that commenced with the chosen Son. Christ's instructional approach frequently uses narratives and illustrations that mirror the verbal customs of Seth's branch. The deliberate maintenance of divine truth through unforgettable stories continues in his work. The followers receiving these instructions become the following connection in the sequence of spiritual transmission extending to Seth himself. Christ's execution mirrors Abel's killing in opposite fashion. Where Cain murdered his brother from spite and animosity, Christ freely surrenders his existence from devotion and submission. Where Abel's blood demanded punishment, Christ's blood announces clemency and pardon. The theme of blameless suffering transforms from disaster into victory. The rising demonstrates divine strength to defeat the mortality that has afflicted Seth's branch since Adam's rebellion. Every descendant of the chosen Son has eventually yielded to death despite their dedication. Christ shatters this theme by emerging from death through divine strength. His conquest over the tomb creates the identical opportunity for everyone who places confidence in him. Christ's elevation mirrors Enoch's removal, while exceeding it in range and meaning. Enoch walked alongside God and was lifted without experiencing death as compensation for personal dedication. Christ rises as the delegate of all people, creating the path for others to proceed. His exaltation enables the spiritual renewal of the whole human species. Christ's guaranteed return will finish the restoration that started with Seth's selection. Where the flood purified the world of physical evil, the ultimate judgment will eliminate all moral wickedness from existence. Where Noah's household restarted the world following the deluge, believers will possess a totally renewed earth following Christ's return. The Church advances Seth's function as guardian of divine truth in a wicked reality. Just as the chosen Son's descendants preserved confidence through history's bleakest stretches, Christian gatherings protect and deliver gospel truth despite resistance and suffering. The identical dedication that marked Seth's offspring now distinguishes Christ's adherents. The Great Directive broadens the evangelistic drive that commenced with Seth's arrival. Where the chosen Son's family tree maintained truth for their offspring, believers now transport that truth to every people and language. The favor promised through Abraham's descendant discovers worldwide expression through the good news proclaimed by Christ's students. The expectation that encouraged Seth's descendants through flood, scattering, slavery, and displacement now encourages believers anticipating Christ's coming. The identical divine reliability that maintained the spiritual lineage through thousands of years of human experience keeps operating in the existence of those who pursue the final descendant of the chosen Son. In Christ, The narrative that commenced with Seth arrives at its planned peak and finish. The overlooked son who rescued humanity. History recalls the victorious generals, the monument builders, the monarchs who molded peoples with weapons and authority. Their identities resound through structures and legends, engraved in rock and honored in verse. Still, humanity's greatest champion stays mostly overlooked, a modest son who never established a domain, never claimed a military triumph, never even spoke louder than a murmur. Seth rescued humanity not through power but through dedication. His selection arrived in humanity's bleakest moment. Mortality had invaded paradise through trickery. The initial killing had marked the ground with blameless blood. God's image carriers confronted elimination before they had scarcely started multiplying. In this emergency, divine compassion supplied another descendant, a substitute for the virtuous son whose existence was terminated by envious violence. Seth embraced his function without spectacle or self-advertisement. He never insisted on acknowledgement for bearing such tremendous duty. Humanity's continuation rested on his reliability. Nevertheless, he pursued his everyday existence with calm commitment to obligation. He took a wife, brought up offspring, tilled the soil, and honored God. Regular pursuits that fulfilled exceptional goals. The spiritual heritage he guarded held more significance than any worldly wealth. While his fellow descendants constructed remarkable urban centers and created extraordinary innovations, Seth preserved something considerably more valuable: the recollection of divine companionship and the anticipation of restored connection. His contribution resided not in his achievements, but in what he handed forward. Every generation of his family tree encountered the identical decision that faced Seth himself: stay dedicated to divine summons, or move toward the appeal of worldly achievement. Some, including Enoch and Noah, achieved remarkable levels of virtue. Others kept a calm dedication that guarded the holy custom without striking display. Everyone added to the extended sequence of spiritual transmission. Maintaining truth through Seth's branch demanded continuous alertness against moral decay. The enticements that finally overcame most of humanity pushed equally against the chosen family tree. Social forces promoted accommodation. Unions with wicked households presented immediate benefits. Nevertheless, sufficient numbers stayed dedicated to maintain the divine light burning through the bleakest ages. Seth's approach to rescuing humanity shows divine inclination for spiritual instead of governmental answers. God might have stopped human wickedness through irresistible might or stunning displays of strength. Rather, the divine strategy operated through dedicated households who guarded truth and conveyed expectation across generations. The seemingly powerless approach demonstrated greater strength than any military force. The flood revealed both the achievement and the boundary of Seth's assignment. His spiritual offspring supplied the surviving group through which human society advanced following divine condemnation. Nevertheless, even that virtuous group bore within themselves the potential for future wickedness. The challenge of human character demanded a more thorough answer than simple maintenance of a dedicated family tree. Seth's function as connection between the former world and the fresh one discovers its final expression in Christ's family tree. The branch that started with the chosen Son culminates in the final chosen Son, Jesus, whose divine character supplies what human dedication alone could never accomplish. Seth guarded the family tree. Christ rescues it entirely. The theme established by Seth persists in every generation of believers. Dedicated parents convey spiritual truth to their offspring. Virtuous gatherings guard divine revelation against social forces to adjust. Regular individuals living calm existences of submission add to intentions they might never completely grasp. The approach that rescued humanity through Seth keeps rescuing it presently. Contemporary believers frequently ignore Seth because his narrative lacks striking action. No supernatural displays characterize his work. No remarkable triumphs confirm his selections. No quick change validates his dedication. Nevertheless, his patient submission throughout nearly 1,000 years of existence achieved more than any military effort or governmental movement possibly could. The overlooked Son instructs that divine goals operate through consistent dedication instead of remarkable accomplishment. God rarely summons regular individuals to exceptional adventures. More frequently, The divine strategy demands simple submission to obvious instructions throughout extended stretches of time. The collection of dedicated selections across generations accomplishes what individual striking actions cannot. Seth's contribution questions modern beliefs about importance and achievement. Contemporary society praises innovation, accomplishment, and individual progress. Seth's illustration proposes that maintenance might be more crucial than advancement, dedication more precious than recognition, transmission more important than change. His calm heroism challenges whether present-day champions genuinely merit their position. The chosen son also shows the strength of divine favor to operate through flawed individuals. Seth wasn't without sin like Christ or removed like Enoch. He experienced a regular human existence characterized by the identical difficulties and constraints that impact everyone born following Adam's rebellion. Nevertheless, God employed his ready submission to achieve rescue for the whole human species. Present-day believers receive the identical summons that characterized Seth's existence, guarding and conveying divine truth in a wicked reality. The particular approaches might vary based on historical situations, but the fundamental assignment stays unchanged. Every generation must determine whether to keep dedication to divine revelation or accommodate with dominant social forces. Seth's narrative provides expectation for those who feel overwhelmed by the wickedness surrounding them. The chosen son existed in a reality where brutality and evil appeared victorious. Powerful beings controlled the world. Wickedness seemed to have achieved total conquest. Nevertheless, his calm dedication supplied the basis for ultimate rescue. Comparable dedication presently adds to intentions that will become obvious in divine scheduling. The overlooked son who rescued humanity reminds us that heroism frequently appears in regular attire. The most crucial conflicts occur in human souls instead of on celebrated war zones. The most significant conquests involve selecting submission over ease, dedication over acceptance, truce over temporary benefit. Through these calm selections, the genuine labor of rescue advances from generation to generation. Seth stays overlooked by most but recalled by God. His identity surfaces in the family records that follow divine intention through human experience. His spiritual impact extends into every generation of believers. His illustration of dedicated transmission supplies the pattern for everyone who attempts to fulfill divine goals in their particular time and location. The chosen son keeps rescuing humanity through everyone who pursues his theme of calm, consistent, dedicated submission to divine summons.